Welcome to Carting Truth Podcast, a father-daughter duo focusing on sharing revelations through conversations with the Lord. Let's get started with today's episode. Welcome to Carting Truth Podcast. I'm Lindsay here with my dad, Shane. And on today's episode, my dad is going to tell the dream he just recently had. It's super powerful and it needs to be out there. And it also relates to the temple that will be built. So when is it going to be built and how long will it take? We're going to touch on those things as well.
Yeah, Lindsay, the other night I had a very disturbing dream. I was in this big place going around telling people about the temple being built and that it was fixing to start and that they should be talking to their loved ones about getting saved. And people weren't listening. They just were not paying any attention at all. And it was very frustrating. And as we went through, I remember one guy got really hostile. And I was trying to explain to him that the agreement had taken place, and that the red heifer had been sacrificed, the temple was going to be built, and that we needed to start telling our loved ones, and if they wasn't saved, you need to get saved. And he was very hostile towards me. I could feel he was lost. And so this anxiety came after that. I was feeling what these people were going to feel like. It's like the Lord was letting me know the feeling that they were going to get once that line in the sand gets drawn, because they didn't listen.
Because they didn't believe.
And it was a terrible feeling. It was very terrible. It had this terror in it. It had this fear in it. And it was just wrapped in anxiety. And I was like, oh, Lord, this is what they're going to feel. This is awful. So, back when I had the vision.
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
A couple of years ago, had a vision before we even started the podcast, and the Lord appeared in my TV, and he said to me via telepathy, I could hear his thoughts. He said, I'm upset. And I said, me? And he said, no, my people don't know what time it is. And I said, no, they don't. And then he said to me, you have to tell them. And of course, we didn't have the podcast or any of that platform at all. And I said, Lord, I'll do what you say. And he said, good. I needed to hear you say that, but it's not time to start yet. And this was like in September of
2023.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we started the podcast in April of 2024.
Yes.
And we have grown.
We have.
Very much for a year, 47,000 plus subscribers now.
And there's a lot of amazing comments that we get, but we do get some comments saying, you're a false prophet, you're not hearing from the Lord. And that reminded me of your dream when you told me.
Yeah.
But we do get some of those comments and they don't believe the temple's going to be built or any of this stuff is going to happen the way that the Lord showed you that it would. And it just makes me very, anxious for them, I guess.
Well, I've asked the Lord several times if I missed the red heifer thing, and he said, no, it's going to happen. And I still feel like it's going to happen before the summer starts. And that's why we said that. And so we're still, proceeding. And until we find out for sure it hasn't happened, we'll keep doing our podcast. If it doesn't happen, I feel like we need to shut down and, because we don't want to be false prophets. We don't want to say anything that's not true. So, but I don't feel like that's going to happen to us.
And we see in our news about this UN meeting taking place that it's a very high probability that this peace agreement is going to go through. And a lot of people said that would never happen.
Well, plus your husband's vision that it's going to happen in October. So, yeah, I feel like we're in the year that it's got to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we are waiting on all this stuff to start being fulfilled. So when the Lord was telling me all this was based on Hosea 5:15, which says, I'm going up to where I was before, which was the ascension. And then after 2 days, he raises us up, which is, chapter 6, verses 1 through 4.
Right.
So we believe Jesus died in AD 32 and ascended in AD 32. And then he will be coming back in 2,000 years, which is 2032. And then you back up 7, you're at 2025. And that's the year that we're in now. And that's why we believe this.
Right.
Now, because on that based on that vision of him saying, my people don't know what time it was, assumes that our understanding is correctly, or why would God appear? And I seen that vision. I didn't hallucinate it, and I didn't make it up. I could not even come up with something that grand as taking over the TV like that.
Right.
So that when he did that, I was like, I must understand what time it is, or he wouldn't be telling me to tell if I didn't know.
Right.
So we went through that. So we're going to touch on how long it takes the temple to be built. We've touched on this before in an earlier episode, but I feel like we need to do it again. So we're going to go over to Daniel chapter 8, and we're going to see how long it will take him to build a temple, and it actually tells us.
Wow.
So we're in Daniel chapter 8, verse 12. And here in the blue it says, and a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Now, I seen that verse some years ago, and I thought, wait a minute, what's the transgression that it's talking about? Because of transgression, the Antichrist is given an army to oppose the daily sacrifice.
Right.
All right? So I was like, what's the transgression? And then it dawned on me that the transgression is the daily sacrifice.
Okay.
So the daily sacrifice starts again. After they build the temple, they start sacrificing. Well, Christ has already made the sacrifice. Right? We don't need a daily sacrifice anymore for sins.
Amen.
Because he's already completed all that. But the Jews don't know that, because that veil that Paul was talking about is over their eyes.
Right.
So they have the mindset to go back and do that. The religious Jews, not the secular ones, but the religious ones. All right?
Right.
So that's what they want to do. Well, because they go back to it and they start doing it, gives the Antichrist power to come against them, because they have to sin in order for Satan to be able to get to them. That's had to happen all the way down through history. If you go in the Old Testament, Satan can never get to them, even David, until he gets them to sin.
And open a door.
Well, they're going to be sinning with something that used to be good.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Because it was a good thing. If you're dealing with somebody, and if God's dealing with us according to the flesh, there has to be sacrifices.
Right.
Well, Christ already dealt with the flesh.
Right.
And redeemed our soul, because he's in the image of God. He took the total penalty. He didn't just cover it. He wiped it out.
Right.
Because he's in the image of God. And he is God in flesh.
Right.
And shed his blood, which atones for our soul, which is a spiritual thing.
Yes.
Well, they're going to try to go back to try and atone for the flesh.
With animal sacrifice.
Which cannot take away sin, but it covers them so you can approach God. And that's what they're trying to do. That's already been done.
It's already been done.
But that transgression gives the Antichrist an army to take away the transgression. And that's what that verse is saying. All right?
Okay.
Now, the next verse starts getting into telling us how long those sacrifices will be performed. So you have to say, okay, the temple has to be built.
Right.
The sacrifices will be performed. Right? And then this desolation comes. The abomination of desolation comes. How many days pass from the time the sacrifices start, which means the temple's finished, until the time that everything's cleared out and made holy again? All right?
Okay.
So one saint tells the other saint how long it takes to do that. So we know that the total time of the 70th week is 2,520 days, 1260 and 1260. All right? Okay. That's the total.
Right.
So if you take out the amount of days that these two saints are about to tell us about, then you come back with a number. And you can divide that by 30, and you can see how many months it will take to build this temple.
Okay.
So let's go over and look at that passage. Okay. So we're in Daniel chapter 8, verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint, which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice? In other words, how long will the daily sacrifice be taking place? And the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot. In other words, one saint was talking to the other one
Right.
and said, Hey, how long will the sacrifices go on? And how long will we continue in this desolation?
Okay.
Right? So now he's going to give him the answer. Now keep in mind that the total week is 2,520 days, which is 1260 and 1260.
Right.
All right. Then we will subtract it and we'll find out how long it takes to build a temple. Now, the other thing you have to understand that in chapter 12, Daniel adds an extra 30 days.
I wondered when that was coming in. Yes.
First part's 1260, the second part's 1260, then Daniel adds an extra 30 days, and that's why he says 1290.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So we got 1260 and 1260 and an extra 30 days. All right.
Okay.
Now let's go back and see what this saint says.
Okay.
So verse 14 of chapter 8 of Daniel says this, And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So we've got 2,300 days, right?
Okay. Yes.
So we were at 1,260 and 1,260, made 2,520.
That's right.
We added 30 more days. We're at 2,550, right?
Right.
Then this saint says that's from the end time back is 2,300 days. In other words, from the time that the sacrifice start to the end of this whole thing is 2,300 days, which is what they're talking about.
Okay.
So you subtract 2,300 days from 2,550, and you get 250 days.
Right.
You divide that by 30, you get 8.3 months.
Is how long it's going to take to build the temple.
Right. So you build a temple, and after 8.3 months, you start having sacrifices, and in 2,300 days, it's all over with.
Wow. And didn't the Temple Institute give an estimate on how long it would take?
They said at one time between 6 months and a year, which that's pretty much dead between them.
Yeah.
But there's some people saying it would only take them a week. I don't think it will take just a week. It'll take, you're talking about some massive stones.
Right.
That have to be put together.
Right.
So you're going to have heavy equipment to move them and all that, get them up on the Temple Mount and, all the equipment you would take to erect that. But 8.3 months would be doable.
Yes.
To complete it, because you got to complete the inside of it and do all that. So these two saints are talking about that. They say from the time the daily sacrifice until the treading down underfoot, until all that is finished, it's 2,300 days. So the temple has to be there before they start sacrificing.
Right.
And we know we've got 2,520 plus 30, which is 2,550.
Right.
Take away 2,300, it leaves us 250. And we divide that by 30. Because the calendar originally was a solar calendar. And when Antiochus Epiphanes came in, he changed it to a lunar calendar. That's why the Jews are still on a lunar calendar now. But it was a solar calendar wherein it had 360 days. They did not count the solstice and the equinox, the 4 days of the solstice and the equinox. So it was 364 days. So whenever they would get behind a week, they would just add another week, and it didn't change the calendar. All the way through the rest of the year, all the dates fell at the right period of time and on the right day. So Passover, Nisan 14th, is always on a Tuesday. Always. So that's why it was always perfected. But since that happened with Antiochus Epiphanes, that has changed. So it's going to take them 8.3 months to build the temple. And that passage is telling us that.
Wow.
And the dream that I had was so frustrating because I was telling people this was going to happen and they did not want to listen.
Which is probably a prophetic warning that that's what's going to happen.
For some.
For some.
Because you got to remember, the Spirit's going to be poured out as the former and latter rain. Mm-hmm. So take Acts and all the things that happen there and over double them. Yes. It'll be like Acts on steroids.
Yeah.
So the Spirit will be so strong. And so on my lawnmower, I got a revelation. And that revelation was, I was thinking, wait a minute, Lord, all the Christians who have been following you up to the period of time that the tribulation starts will be seasoned Christians. They've been walking with the Lord all this time.
Right. Okay.
And they've been walking in the Spirit, and they know Him.
Mm-hmm.
How are these young Christians going to be able to survive to make that kind of decision to die for their faith? That was crossing my mind while I was mowing the lawn.
Ooh.
And the Spirit spoke to me. He said, that's why the Spirit is going to be so strong. It will be so strong, it will eradicate all those doubts. They will gain what took some years in just a matter of a few years, maybe 2 or 3. And even the ones toward the end, it will be so strong that it will mature people. It'll be like a growth serum. It will mature them in the Spirit so strong. That's why He's coming so strong with it. And that was the revelation He gave to me while I was mowing the yard.
Oh my goodness.
That He would accelerate their growth rate in the Spirit.
I've wondered about that for what took us a lifetime, 40 years to you at this point.
Right.
30 to me at this point, or 25. And they're just going to be escalated in their faith and their maturity from what people would call a baby Christian.
They're going to literally get a taste of heaven on earth. And that's kind of what's happening in this week. The first part of the week for those who are saved will be like heaven on earth. It will be so strong in the Spirit, and it will grow them so fast. And then the second part will be like hell on earth for those who do not receive it. Isn't that the great dividing between the light and the darkness? Isn't that what God did at the first? He divided the light from the darkness. That's what's happening again. And that was the revelation I got on my lawnmower, because I was worried about them. I was thinking, wait a minute, these people who have been saved for years, they're going to have a whole lot less trouble through this time. And then the Lord spoke. He said, no, I'm going to accelerate it. And I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. That's why it's going to be so strong in the Spirit. It's going to be so strong and such a great witness to those who just are babies in Christ. It's going to grow them up spiritually enough where they can make the right. Because if not, you can't put a brand new Christian out there in this kind of situation and expect him to survive.
Right. And it's so true.
So that's why the Spirit is going to be poured out so strongly.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
That's amazing. If you are enjoying the content and would like to support our ministry, you can do so through Venmo or PayPal. Our handle is @CardingTruth, or use our QR code. To see you in heaven.
Just confess your sins, make Jesus the Lord of your life, abide in Him, and walk with Him, and you will live with Him forever.
As always, we want to thank you for hanging out with us today. We would love to get some comments from you all in the comments section. Any feedback, anything that you want to tell us, we read those, we try to respond to those, and we are so thankful for those. Thank you to our subscribers. We are so glad that you're here. And if you haven't subscribed, we would love if you would like, subscribe, and click that bell for more notifications. We have more episodes to come, and we're so excited to share those with you. Until next time from Carding Truth, be blessed.